not often at the beginning of a launch, as many of you will know, that I kind of find myself bordering on speechless. I took Mignonne's book home with me. It arrived at the end of last week. I took it home with me on Monday evening with the idea that I would dip into it and read 20 or 30 or 40 pages to have a sense of it before tonight. And I couldn't put it down. This book is incredibly compelling. It is exquisitely written. It is heart-wrenching. It's heartbreaking. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Mignonne, for being here. And thank you, Dawn.
As you can imagine, this is a difficult subject, and the worst part of it is to have to read anything of it. So I asked my very dear friend from way, way back, Jane, who knew Matthew extremely well his whole life, and she's going to read a little bit from the book and in between our conversation with Dawn.
And so we start with her favourite walk along the sea at Musenberg. 22nd of September 2011. Dear Matthew, today I caught the magic light, that wonderful lazy globe just before sunrise that eases one gently into the day and fills one with hope and possibility. This is when I like to walk, along the sea, on the mountain, through the flea, down by the village. My time when night's dreams settle and new ideas begin to emerge. And so it happened today that the thought came to me. I must write to you. It's been such a long time, Matthew, and I've been waiting and waiting. If I write, will you respond?
Just to start, think of why write and why put your work out into the world once you've written?
Perhaps I could just tell you the story of how this book came about. I suppose I wrote the book that I wanted to read. After Matthew died, I really searched and searched for something to read, and I couldn't find anything that resonated with my own feelings and experience. And that took me to the path of Anne Schuster, who those of you who write will know that she's a very well-known author. But she said, why don't you just write about Matthew, just like that, about his life and so on. So I started writing about his life. Sitting in this little cottage at the Breier in Claremont, where Anne lives. And then I realized that there was a huge chunk of his life where I couldn't actually remember anything. From the age of about 9 to 20 or so, I actually couldn't tell you what that boy did. And I suddenly, in the middle of one night, I started to write to Matthew and was trying to address what had happened in that time and why we had been unable to communicate and so on.
Seeing that the book is about your relationship with your son, could you tell us a little bit about your son? Because, you know, in this problem with communication, I mean, it was a very literal one as well, and what he managed to achieve despite that.
I can't really describe what it's like to be a mother of a child who has a hearing problem, and a mother's not handling it very well, but there's a reading.
Could I ever have imagined that the topic of my writing would be you, and that the purpose would be so enormous, to write my way to some kind of understanding of what happened to you, and why, and where you are now? Strange how the night wind howling makes me think about your hearing. And there's something else I want to say, something that is on my conscience. It concerns a cricket match. You were about 15 and I was watching, a rare occurrence, and saw you ignoring an umpire's shout, or was it a teammate's, I can't remember. The main thing is that I saw you ignoring a command, and I saw some horrible father jumping up and down on the sidelines, shouting at you to do something or other, presumably what the signal was all about. And you didn't. You just stood there and did nothing, waiting, as cricketers seem to do most of the time, for something to happen, some ball to come your way. And to this day, I seethe with anger when I think of that father, that tiny-minded, bloated ego prick, whose son's cricket match was so important to him that he could jump up and down on the sideline, shouting things at young boys to make them win. But the thing that makes me angriest that makes me boil with distress and the shame of it is that I did nothing. I saw that father, and I heard that father, and I did not go up to him and say, "You bloody fool, that is my son you are shouting at. And he can't hear you."
Just to say, this question of things that you don't say and you wish you'd said, I mean, one thing I did realise, it's common or therapeutic when someone dies to try and say the things that you wished you'd said when they were alive. So in a way, I suppose that's what I was doing. I was trying to say to Matthew the things that I had not been able to say.
It's a wonderful observation, that. You had a dream about another author who wrote about his child's death in a very different way. I mean, you only made that connection later, but maybe you want to do the reading and speak a bit about that.
She dreams she has been in bed with J.M. Coetzee, but can't understand it because she doesn't like his work. Then she realises he too has lost a son, aged 23, and though he hasn't written anything directly about it, his book, Master of Petersburg, is about the death of a young man and the grief of his father. The central figure is a fictionalized Dostoevsky, but it could have been Coetzee. I have read The Master of Petersburg. Well, it is even grimmer than the other books of Coetzee's that I've read. Basically, a fictionalized story about Dostoevsky mourning the death of his stepson Pavel, who has fallen mysteriously from a high balcony. Coetzee's son also died in a mysterious fall, I have learnt. Various bleak things happen to Coetzee's Dostoevsky, who begins to conjure from his experiences some of the characters that he will eventually include in his next novel. And at the end of the book, he starts to write The Possessed. The novel probably mirrors Coetzee's own life as much, if not more, than Dostoevsky's. Mourning the death of his son, Nicholas, Coetzee ends up writing The Master of Petersburg, in which he expresses his emotions through a work of semi-fiction set in Russia more than 100 years ago. So what is my opinion? I think it is all an elaborate layering and a complicated avoidance of truth. Why couldn't Coetzee just spit it out? Why couldn't he just write about his son and his emotions directly? Tell us what happened and how he felt about it. But I must say, I'm glad that Coetzee wrote what he did and that he managed to eke out the story of the Master of Petersburg, because it has given me a sense of paternal grief, of a father's despair that I did not have before. Do you think I could also try one day to give others a sense of maternal grief through writing about you?
The book is a wonderful tribute to Matthew's life and how he was turning his life around. He graduated posthumously and he was doing research with women in the Eastern Cape. Would you like to speak a little bit about that?
What was it, Matthew, that made you choose to do your honours study and later also your masters on rural women? Time, Poverty and Women's Agency in Rural South Africa was the title of your MPhil. Your honours thesis was about access to community services, but also mainly about women. Of course, you were using game theory, so there were lots of squiggles in both pieces, but also women. Poor women, very poor women. Was it that your own hardship, your disability, your deafness meant you identified more strongly with the weak and poor than others might have done? Perhaps it was easier to be in the presence of hardship than of happiness when your heart was struggling. That is something I've learnt. Jonathan Hall is for me another Matthew place, a place where I cannot go without thinking of you and all the times we were there with you. My master's graduation, when you and Daniel both came, and we all had supper afterwards at the Turkish restaurant Anatoli's. My PhD graduation, when only Daniel came with Dad, because you were on a surfing weekend near Jeffreys Bay. And later, I was so glad you went, because I found in a little notebook on your desk a small scribble that this was the happiest weekend of your life. And then there were your own graduations. Your BCom graduation, when you went up shy and tall and straggly haired in a suit under your black gown and had to be prompted to go because you could not hear the dean calling out your name, or so I was told by someone. I didn't go because I was ill at the time. And your honours graduation, when you slopped up in an open shirt, hair closely cut, your cochlear processor for all to see and notice in the bright blue casing which you had chosen. And finally, there was your master's graduation. You won't know about that, because it was, as they said in the preamble in the newspapers, posthumous. And it was Dave and I who went up to receive your scroll. And it was for us, much as for you, that the audience clapped and clapped, and then stood up en masse. The standing ovation that Prince Charles, with all his pomp and important words, was unable to achieve. But oh Matthew, the agonies behind that clapping, the dreadful pain, and more. It seemed right when your thesis was passed, and it seemed right that you should graduate, and even that Dave or I or one of us should go up and receive the certificate and shake the Vice-Chancellor's hand. And it seemed right too that I should search and search for the right clothes to wear, and eventually came up with a new outfit. Black jacket, black trousers, white shirt long enough to hide the fact that jacket sleeves are always too short for me, as they were for you, and black shoes with a bow on the front, which I didn't like, but I had to put up with because there are not many shoes in size 8. And it seemed understandable that I should feel so nervous before the occasion that I had to go and buy some water, and then had to go and get rid of the water. But it was not right. Was totally unfair, totally cruel, absolutely mercilessly unkind of God, that I should, halfway between the cafe and the toilets, fall flat on my face on the concrete paving, so that when I eventually went up to receive your certificate, my face was weeping through grazes, blood, ooze, and melting makeup.
Thank you. I came across a wonderful term the other day, bibliotherapy. I mean, I think of books as having, or reading and writing as having saved my emotional life. And this book's going to fall into that category. Thank you.
Dealing with anniversary days, anniversaries of the 8th of May 2007. There's one more anniversary that I want to speak of. It was the 2nd anniversary of your death, and particularly hard. Daniel was overseas and the weather had been bad, grey and rainy. I took leave on the 7th as well as the 8th, feeling mounting grief and tears. On the morning of the 7th, I decided to go to the Blue Route shopping centre to indulge in one of my common forms of therapy, shopping. There is something about the temperature of an air-conditioned centre and the bustle of its shoppers that provides a warmth and cold and human life that I need when I'm depressed. That Thursday was no exception, but it didn't go quite as planned. Outside the entrance, the cinema side, I noticed a smallish tan-coloured dog sitting bewildered in the gutter. But I thought to myself, that dog is just the size I like. But then closer, I saw the dog in a different light. Scruffy, cowering, ill perhaps, a stray, a cur. I remembered also how much Dave didn't want a dog and how often he'd told me so. So I went inside and lifted my spirits with retail therapy, and 2 hours later, carrying clothes I returned the next week and groceries we didn't need, I left the shopping centre from the same side I entered. Lo and behold, there was the dog still in the gutter, still cowering, but this time with 2 middle-aged women worrying about it, the one on a cell phone, the other fumbling with a lead. "Can I help?" I asked. "Do you want a dog?" In the end, the 8th of May 2009 was taken up entirely with this dog, taking him out, taking him in, washing him, feeding him, even patting him, Dave, and hugging him, me. And although you were also with me that day, Matthew, at the back of my mind and everything I did, and although I still remembered the pain and sorrow and trauma of your death, my memories, thank heavens, were blurrable, blurred as they were, with dog. Jackie. Jackie the jackal. Jackie the shady one. Jackie the godsend.
Once again, thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you very much for your growth.